It is episode 2 of Femgineer Chats, and today I wanted to talk about policy, governance, and action, the action that we take as a result of these things. And I've just prepared a little presentation to kind of help me along the way. And I just cannot wait to get into it. It's a little bit different from last week, and I guess that's the whole point of this, is to keep it interesting and see what people enjoy listening to. So I'm going to get into the presentation mode. But while I do so, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining me live, and I do really appreciate the support. I think that Femgineer Chats is going to be it's going to hold a really important place for me in my personal brand and in my business. I think that it's a really great way to share knowledge and freely, which is a key word, to share knowledge freely and hopefully inspire people to get them to act and start the conversation around sustainability. So today I wanted to talk about policy and governance and the action that corporations end up taking as a result of the policies that they commit to, and kind of what the difference is between each of those things are and why they are so important for all three to be congruent with each other, and also what it means in the context of sustainability. So I guess we can get into it. I'm sharing it as a PDF. This is just what I've been allowed to download it as, but hopefully it's not too much of an issue for you guys. But basically, as I said, we're going to go through policy, governance, and kind of the history of how governance has evolved and the frameworks that we now rely on as businesses, and essentially then what action that leads to in terms of sustainability. So the differences between all of these things is that policy, kind of like government policy, is really the written commitment that governments, that businesses make towards their values that they claim are important for them. So, most of you would have worked in businesses where they say, they've got their 3 core values or their 5 core values: integrity, kindness, honesty, truth, whatever it may be. So whatever those values are, they create these policies that help solidify that in a written form. And so that's what the policy is. And then we move into a place of governance. So essentially, governance is that system or that mechanism of control. And so the word is sometimes used in terms of the word control, but it's not as kind of domineering as it sounds. But the idea is to create a structure around this policy. It's to essentially hold these businesses and these corporations and these governments to account for the words that they put down on paper in their policies. And so the framework that we then build out from this governance structure are the tools that we use. So we need to use specific tools based on where our business, if in the context of business, where our business is at in a particular market, and what is going to be important to our business, whether it's social sustainability, or whether it's 20% growth year on year. Whatever it is that is important will help us define which framework tool we're going to use to execute our governance. And finally, action, which we all love. What are the actions that we're going to take to achieve these policies and these policies that we've committed to? Nothing else. So I guess what's important to note here is that over 90% of Australians and consumers are wanting businesses to be acting towards environmental sustainability. And so this is where it becomes really important to know your consumer, to know your clients, the community, the stakeholders, because they're all the ones that make or break your business. Not in the sense of only buying your products or using your services, but also in terms of investing in your business and the way they speak about your business, because online profile and social branding is so important these days. It's the only way that people know how to buy. So it's so important that we're considering sustainability, because that's one of the biggest things that people want when they're buying a product or a service or a brand. And so starting with the policy, what is your business committing to? So most corporations use their policy to voice their opinions and their values and create a strong reputation for their business. And actually, policy makes the business accountable for these commitments. So although it may not seem like a legal contract, it is actually binding, and people can really hold you to account if you're not if your actions are not congruent with your policy. So yeah, really important that businesses have policies that are aligned with their values. And in terms of sustainability, important sustainable policies can be around waste, circular waste management for one, where you are looking at, where you're committing to zero waste output, and you're committing to a circular waste cycle that continuously or almost continuously reuses the waste products, because there's a useful resource in that waste product. So that's one way. Or it might be net zero emissions. That might be a policy that your business is committed to. So usually, in my experience, I've seen a lot of businesses commit to things like net zero emissions or zero waste to landfill. So circular waste management is a really important way to get there in terms of zero waste. And so, the governance, the structure that we create under that policy, it is an extension of the policy, and it really solidifies what are the commitments that the business has made. And so by creating this structure, we can hold businesses accountable to make sure that they're actually following through. And, it's important, I guess, to know where your business is at yourselves. Have you, looked at what your business, what governance your business is following, and what are the drivers of that governance? Is it the 3 Ps of sustainability, like people, profits, planet? So, what is it that drives the governance structure? And essentially these, the frameworks, the word I mentioned, which is the tool to clearly define how you're going to execute your governance commitments, is really important to look at which framework your business is using. So there are a range of tools out there, strategic frameworks, tools, whatever you want to call them. There are a range of strategic frameworks out there, and they are used to guide the business in their mission to accomplish and achieve growth. So traditionally, frameworks were guided around things such as business growth and success and revenue and profit, and things that were quite archaic, like archaically seen as successful in businesses. But over the last, I'm not sure, I'm going to spitball here and say over the last 10 to 20 years, there are new things that are becoming important to businesses, and that's not just around business revenue and profit and growth and sales margins and that sort of thing. It's actually more around social sustainability and environmental sustainability and ethical supply chains, fair treatment, gender diversity. So, there's so many other things that are becoming important to businesses. So I guess some of the more traditional, but still very useful frameworks to use, which, just to note here, I'm not saying these frameworks are wrong. I think these frameworks can be used in conjunction with a sustainable framework, but these are the more traditional ones that are focused on financial profit and gain for the business. So, we've got your Porter's 5 forces. It's a way of looking at the competition, the attractiveness of your product and profitability. You've got your BCG matrix. It's the Boston Consulting Group that came up with a matrix. GE, General Electric, and McKinsey, who are pretty big firms and still are huge firms in the market, created a matrix for managing your portfolio. So there's a range of frameworks that we can look to solidify our governance, our policy, and our governance commitments. And so now the new age kind of view on how we should commit to a governance framework is actually changing, as I said. So what you may hear are terms such as ESG or CSR. Now, ESG is environmental social governance, and CSR is corporate social responsibility. And so corporate social responsibility has actually been around for a while. ESG is a more recent term, and some say that an ESG is probably more rigorous in its structure, because there's a lot more accountability that the leaders are held to in terms of actually delivering on their commitments. If they've committed to net zero emissions by 2030, or if they've committed to zero waste to landfill, we talked about that one, by 2050, or if they've committed to a fully ethical pay in terms of their supply chain, ethical pay by 2025. Whatever it is that they've committed to in their policy, that comes through in these types of sustainable frameworks. There's real accountability, and actually leaders actually get pay cuts, or there's some kind of repercussion behind them not meeting these targets. And in some instances as well, the businesses that are truly committed to their policy will actually ask them to politely to step down from their role. So this is where businesses are now really shifting their mindset and truly committing to sustainability, and that's not just of the environment, that's of people as well. So some of the sustainable frameworks that I can mention are the Task Force for Climate Change Financial, I always mess this one up, but Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosure. And that one is a really interesting one. It's a little bit more recent, and it essentially helps businesses, it ensures businesses are being climate diligent, and that is what defines whether they get funding or financing from financial institutions. So that's a really important one. It's to actually say, well, you're not going to get your money, whether it's in terms of insurance or financing a project or a loan, whatever it is, you're not going to get it if you're not actually being sustainable. Most of you would have heard of the Sustainable Development Goals. The UN, the United Nations, back in 2015, when they brought together all the member states, they came up with the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And that's essentially the blueprint that most businesses now use. And not all are going to be applicable, but they commit to the ones that are applicable for their business, depending on the type of work or they do, or the service they provide, or the goods that they sell. So Sustainable Development Goals are a widely well-known framework. And there's a few others there, but I don't know a lot of details around all of these, but I guess the idea here is to highlight how it's really shifting now to more sustainable frameworks that are considering people and the environment as a key part of the business. And so I guess we can move on to action. What does all of this mean in terms of action? So there are various things that businesses then do that essentially, it's essentially taking a strategy into an implementable task. So, you can say, I'm committed to net zero emissions, but that means nothing until you actually do something about it. So the action that the business can take is a really great part, because that's where people like myself come in to help businesses achieve these goals that they've committed to. So there are so many ways that businesses can take action, and there are things such as accreditation, so they can get certifications around certain things that they've achieved. And I'll go into that in a little bit more detail in the next slide, but you can get an accreditation for your particular achievements, or you can hit particular ratings if your development has certain levels of sustainable achievements. Or you can just go ahead and get the right people to get in there and get into the business, the right experts, get in there and start taking action. And that might not mean that you get the accolades of an accreditation, but some of the times these accreditations or these rating schemes don't actually cover everything. So sometimes you can just get in there and start doing the work, taking the aligned action. And so some of the things that are applicable in Australia in terms of accreditations and ratings would be ESS, and that is the Energy Saving Scheme. That's a New South Wales government initiative. We've got the federal scheme, the ERF, Emissions Reduction Fund, and that is what what it stands for exactly, which is about emissions reduction. And it was based on Australia's quite conservative commitments of 5% emissions reduction or something a little while back. But I think there's a lot of changes happening around that, which is a good thing. So, Australia's kind of finally coming to the table around committing to stronger targets around emissions reduction. We've got the VEET scheme. I forget what this stands for every time, but this is a Victorian energy something scheme. But the point is, these schemes are really great around emissions and energy capture and how we can reduce our energy and emissions profiles. And so they actually give you financial incentives for reducing your profile, which is really great. Then, you've got your rating schemes such as ISCA. ISCA is Infrastructure Sustainability Council of Australia, and Green Star and Neighbours. And essentially these three tools, and there's plenty others, that help new developments, existing developments, and infrastructure. So not just buildings, but also infrastructure sites achieve a particular star rating based on how sustainable they are in terms of a range of areas. So beyond just energy, beyond emissions, we're looking at waste, we're looking at social procurement, hiring, innovation, water, waste, resources. The list goes on. There's a lot that is embedded into these ratings. And so sometimes from what I know, there's not a lot of financial incentive. It's not direct financial incentive as there are with these accreditations, but there are a lot of people taking on these star rating tools into their business and into their developments, because it means they are then meeting particular building requirements or particular development requirements, or their stakeholders are expecting that they hit a particular star rating. So those are the different types of ratings, and quite popular ones in Australia in particular. And then, as I said, really good old DIY, just get in there, take the aligned action, hire the engineers, hire the consultants, hire the experts, and get into acting your policy statements. Get in there and just get the right people to implement them, and make sure that you're always measuring and you're verifying that what you committed to and what they said they will achieve for you is actually achieved. And if it's not, try to understand why. So measuring and verifying all of this action that you take in your business is really important, because it goes to show whether the person that implemented it or the team that implemented it did it correctly, and if they didn't, what went wrong, so you can do better for next time. And so so that's, I guess that really just takes us to the end of the presentation. And I'm so glad to have shared that with all of you. I just need to check something quickly. No, that's okay. So look, I'm so thrilled to have had you all along, and I think I would just like to leave you all with a quote from Al Gore. And thank you for those watching live. I'm sorry that I haven't said hello while you've been on, but thanks to my mother-in-law is on there, my husband is on there, my sister, from what I can see so far. So thank you so much for joining me live. And I just wanted to leave you with a quote from Al Gore, and that is that we have to abandon the conceit that isolated personal actions are going to solve this crisis. Our policies have to shift. So I hope that this has been really helpful for you, and I think that shifting culture through sustainability is so important, and that's the ethos that I work under. And so I thought this was really important that I shared this particular topic with you guys. I hope you found it helpful, and thank you so much for your time today. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to say goodbye to all of you. Thank you so much for joining me, and have an amazing day and the rest of the week. And everybody take care and stay safe. Bye.